Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm super happy to bring a new tutorial. So after almost a year without recording, I had a lot of things going on. I finally found time to be back and creating videos for you guys that I enjoy the most. So basically this tutorial is going to be a MERN app. So we're going to use Node.js Express with MongoDB and React on our front end. I have an idea that I think is going to be cool. We're going to create the app from the zero to the deployment. So we're going to go together step by step. This tutorial it wasn't planned to be for those who are actually learning JavaScript right now. It is a tutorial that will require you to have a little bit of experience with JavaScript at the basic level. The rest I will be explaining line by line. I'll try to give as much detail and information as I can, and I will give you a quick tour right now about the app so that you can have an idea what we're going to build together. It's going to be a long series, and if you guys want, we can perhaps in the end try to create a native app as well using React Native, so you could access the application also on the mobile. So let's think about that. If you are interested, please remember to leave a comment saying that you're interested in the React Native app, and we can discuss that, right? So for a start, this is not a complete demo, so the API is not ready yet. We're going to build it together, and the front end is also not finished. So I'm going to show you a quick demo of the idea I have, and we can create that together, right? So we're going to have a fitness club app. Basically, imagine that you want to run a marathon or event. You can create new events, you can put description, you can add price, and people can subscribe to those events to receive more information and participate from your event if you're creating an event, right? So this is basically, we'll have a system to log in and create a new account. So we're gonna create that and store in the MongoDB. We're gonna hash the password. So I'm gonna be showing you guys how we can do all of this stuff. So basically we're going to create a new account. We're gonna use forms validations. You can create different types of accounts. You can have a partner. A partner will be someone that will create the events, or you could be a customer. A customer will be a person that will have a dashboard and will be able to see all the details of the events, and perhaps even in the future consume that into the React Native application for Android or iPhone. So for this example, we don't handle all the scenarios yet, but let's create a new I'll call jean.com. That's my name. The password will be test, and the password will be test. So this is going to be a partner account. Let's submit that. No, I don't want to save. And then because this is an account for a partner, you'll be able to add a new event. As you can see, I didn't style the buttons yet. I didn't have time, but basically just to show you the idea of the app that we're going to build together. So the title could be a marathon event. The description will be the fastest marathon. The date could be 22/12/2020. The price for joining could be £30. And then if you pick an image, it will show you the preview of the image. This image initially we're going to be saving on disk, but this functionality is not actually working yet, but just to show you an idea. And then if you create an event, you would have an event with the price. As I can tell you, the image is not being there, is there, but is undefined because I'm not handling the image, and that's how you're going to be able to see the image. So you will be able to see the image. Maybe we can do something, an overlay that show like a picture. So if you click, you can delete it. You can cancel events, change the date. we're gonna go over all of this. Basically, to build this app, you will need to have a few things. I'll be using VSCODE. So this is a Visual Studio Code. It's completely free. So if you want to use the same IDE that I'm using, that's fine. If you don't want to use that one, you can use another one. I'm also happy for that there's no problems. You will need to have Node.js installed. I recommend you to using the long time support version. And we're going to create an account at MongoDB Atlas so that we can set up our database. Also, another thing that would be very interesting, if you didn't come with that before, if you didn't came across Insomnia before, this is basically a completely free tool that helps us to debug APIs, and we can have a nice feedback. So I'll show you an example. So you would be able to create your queries, send to the server, and you will be able to see, in this case, the response from the server. So as you can see, I create a password that is a password, and we're going to have this hash password as a response. So this is very helpful. That's what we're going to use for basically build our backend. So you can go to insomnia.rest, make sure that you install Insomnia. You can download it down here. Basically, there's no secret. I'll help you doing the way how to set up. And MongoDB, you're going to need to create a free account at MongoDB. So basically, I have an account already. Basically, after you log in with your account, you can come to this screen. In my case, I have a cluster here already. Maybe you don't have any if you never used. So you're going to create and build new cluster. Here you're going to pick up AWS. Make sure that you look for one of those free tiers available. In my case, I'm in London, but this is not free. So Ireland has free tiers available. So I'll be picking up Ireland. Maybe if you're in India, you can pick this one up. If you are in America, you can try Virginia or Oregon, the closest to you. Maybe Australia, there's this free as well. I think you kind of get the point. So when you create a new cluster, you're going to have a few options to fill. In my case, because I have a cluster already, it doesn't show the free option for me anymore, but for you, it's gonna pop this one up. So you don't need to be worried about this. In my case, I have my cluster created, so I will cancel this one. And here, basically, in your cluster, I create this one MERN tutorial. So you need to keep two things in mind. When you first create one, it's going to have a button here so that you can create a new cluster, a new cluster 0. And then after you do that, you're going to have a similar screen like my one. So if you click in connect, this is very important. You're going to be able to come back to connect your application. This is the link that we're going to use to build the application. So this is basically what we're going to need to work with this app. So you're going to need a cluster, you're going to need a Node.js, you're going to need Insomnia, you're going to need a VSCODE or another tooling, right? So now that we know what we're going to need, let's start to create this app together. First thing I'm going to do, I will be creating a new terminal session. So I'm using Mac here, but you could be using other terminal, you could be using Windows. So basically I will create a new folder inside of this. So basically I will create a new folder called tutorial 01. This is the first video. So then inside the tutorial 01, we're going to go to that folder. Here basically we have an option to do npm init because we're going to need npm. Remember, you need to have Node.js installed. If you pass -ui, you have the option of default configuration. That's exactly what we're looking for here. Then let's open this in the VS Code. So we're going to start a project with inside the folder, right, tutorial 01. Or if you don't want to do that inside your terminal, or if you're using Windows, you can open VS Code. Basically, if you don't want to do that on terminal, you can open VS Code. You can look for open your workspace, open your folder, and you can find where you create your folder, that the result is going to be the same. After we get to this point, the first thing I'm going to do now, I'm gonna install a few things that we're going to need. So in this case, I'll be using npm. Feel free to use yarn if that's what you like. I'll be installing Express, I'll be installing Mongoose, and I will be installing Course for now, right? And the reason being, Express is the framework that we're going to use to build our server. Mongoose is the abstraction, is the library that helps us to connect to our database. I'll be showing you guys exactly how we do that. But basically that's what we're going to use right now. Oh, also let's install .env as well. So .env is also another interesting library that's going to help us to read some environment variables. So I'll show you how we can do something that will help us to keep the secret safe, so we don't have any issues with the secrecy of our connections to the database, right? So after you install, this is going to take a few seconds. We're going to basically now define our first server. So I'll start creating here a new folder. It will be a source folder for our server. Inside this source folder, we're going to create a file called server.js. This is where we're going to start building our first Express server. Basically, let's start requiring Express. So this will be common.js. So let's look for Express. After the Express, we can define the app, right? So then we're going to call this function Express. Oops, I miss a equal here, equal sign. And now we have like that an app, completely a server. So after we define, there's a few things that I want to define here so that it will help us. So I want to define a port, and basically we want to look for the process.env.port. If we don't have that available, we're going to say that I want to use the port 8000, right? And this is basically a thing that I'm doing now, because in the future when we deploy that, this is a requirement so that we can deploy to Heroku or to another place, because they will tell us which port that our app is going to be running. Otherwise, if you're running locally, we're going to use the port 8000. So then after we do that, we can basically do an app.listen. We will pass the port, and as a second argument, so you can pass a function callback, a function that basically we're going to log exactly what we're doing here. So we're going to say listening on port, something like that. So we have a response. The next thing that we need to do, let me increase the size, make sure that it's comfortable for you guys to see that in the screen, because I have a high resolution screen. The next thing that we want to do here is come back to the package JSON, and here we have as a main index, and this is wrong. So the main thing that we have here is going to be source, and it's going to be server.js. Another important thing, we're going to have we don't have this now, So basically what we're going to do here, we're going to create a start script that basically will do a node, the same thing that on top. We're going to go for server.js, right? With that in mind, if you come down here, you should be able to do start. Let me see. Oh, this is my mistake. Actually, we don't need to put that there. So basically now we're listening in 8,000. So to show you that this is working, we should create probably an endpoint here. So let's do app.get. We're going to pass as a first param is always the path that you want to cover. In this case, we want to do just this slash. I will show you for a second. And then you do rest.enhack. And here's going to be an arrow function again that basically we're going to use response.send. And we can say hello from Express. So this is going to be our hello world. Let me stop and start the server again so that you can see what we're going to do next. Now, if you're first time using this app, I suggest you to create a new project. So you can come here. Let me create another one just to show you what I mean. Create a new workspace, right? I have a few workspaces here. So when you click here, you could create a new workspace like that. And that will be a brand new workspace. In my case, I have already the MERN tutorial created. So I will help you to set up something. So this will be a little bit better for us to work. If you go environments here, this is quite nice. You can go manage environment. Then I'm going to say that the URL is basically the local host 8000. And I will show you why. This is basically a variable that we're setting up inside the base environment. After you write this, make sure that you write like a JSON, right? So you write like that. JSON needs to have both things under parentheses, right? Let me delete that, just show you what I mean. And you click in done. Once you have done, we will create now a new request that will be a hello world get request. Here you can see basically what type of requests we're going to be using. During this application, mostly we're going to use get, post, put, and delete. And basically, after you click in create, now I have a new get request there, right? Hello world. So what you can do here, you can call that variable. So if you type URL, basically is going to create that for us. And this is like a shorthand for 8000. And the reason being that I like to use that is because imagine that in the future you want to change the port number. So if you don't have environment variables, you need to go every single request that you have and change that. But if you have an environment, if you have a URL, you don't need to do that, right? So you could do like URL, like I'm doing here, register. This is an endpoint that we're gonna create in a few minutes. But after we have the hello world here, let's have a test. Hello from Express is encoding. Oh, yeah. It's because it's send. So this is a typo. For some reason, when I typed, I didn't notice that I picked the wrong one. So now if I send another request, So if you send another request, oh gosh, sorry guys. So if you I have a typo here. So if you send another request, the first parameter is always the request, the second is always the response. So that's why we're having this error here. I'll try to keep all the errors on so that we can learn together. You guys can see what we're doing. So now if you do that, basically that's going to work, right? So this is exactly what we expected. A few things that we need to add here. We want to add app.use course. Let's define course below here. Const course equal require course. This is something that will allow us to basically be using so course will allow us to do requests from different devices, so without compromise our requests. Another thing that we need to use, I like to keep them down here, so will be app.use, then we're going to call express.json, and basically what that does, it returns a middleware that passes JSONs as a response. So it kind of helps us having a JSON response, right? Okay, so this is the first stage. Something that I'm going to install here, you can do .save dev is Nodemon. The reason being is that Nodemon helps us with the speed and development speed, so it's going to be quite helpful for us. So the first thing that we want to install is npm.install. Let's install Nodemon. So basically what Nodemon does, Nodemon helps us every time that I change the code, I don't need to restart the server, and this is going to help us quite a lot. So I'll come back to my package.json now, and I will create a new script. That is script I will call dev. You can call whatever you decide to call, and basically you pass Nodemon and instead of node and the same address that we have there. So now if you type here npm run dev, it runs the Nodemon. Just to show what I mean, if we do another request now, basically if you click and do another request, you can see that hello from Express is there. But if you come back here, change this hello from Node.js from Nodemon and save, you can see this line here that it kind of updated and restarted the server. So now if I send another request, it's changed, right? Or the same thing, you could go directly to the browser, localhost 8000, and that will be from Nodemon as well. So Insomnia comes quite handy because when you're working with API, this is the best way that you can test your API. So you can quite quickly get the post and create the post requests and see the responses. And that's how we're going to use it. So this is the first step. Now there's a few things that we need to configure. One is going to be the environment. So I think basically let's create now all the new keys for the new user that we're going to use, and then we can create a file to show you what I mean by that. So do you remember that I asked you to create a new MongoDB account and a new cluster? So right now when you build a new cluster, if you didn't yet, you create a new cluster inside of your project. There is 3 options that you can find there. And the next thing that you need to do is come back to your network access. This is quite important. And you're going to add IP address. And there's an option here that you can add Let me check. You can add, oh, it's because I have here already. Let's delete that and do it together. So if you add here the first time, allow access from anywhere, right? So if you allow the access from anywhere, anyone can connect to your connection. Of course, if you add your IP address, it's gonna find your current IP, and just yourself you'll be able to use that user or connect to this database. So because I'm recording that, and I know that you guys going to see my user and all the things that I am creating here, so I'll be using my own IP, so that if you perhaps try to use my key, that's not going to work for you. So I recommend you to create your own keys and your own users, otherwise you won't be able to follow along this tutorial, right? So I'll be creating this. So that's my IP address there. The next thing that you need to do is go to your database access, and then you need to create a new user, right? So we'll add a temporary user here. So basically we're going to use a password for do that. I recommend this will be a temp user for me, just so that I can record this tutorial. And the password, I will auto generate the password, so I will show you which password is, because it will be a temporary. So this is going to be working for just 1 day. Of course, to carry on this tutorial, I'll be using other users. So that I suggest you to create your own user, use your own credentials. I will copy this, right, inside the project. So basically what we're going to do here, we're going to create a file outside. There'll be .env. This needs to be outside of this folder, right? And what we're going to do here, we're going to have two main things. We're going to have a session secret that we're going to use in the future. This will be just a secret. Secret, yeah. And we're going to have a MongoDB secret connection. So the MongoDB, I'll paste that password here, right? So I know that my user will be temp user and my password will be this one. So I will create this user. And as soon as I create this user, you can see this is gonna expire in 1 day. So now we're gonna come back to our cluster and we're gonna click in connect. Here there's a few things that we need to do. You go for your connect to your application. Make sure that you have Node.js and version 3 or later here. And then you're going to copy this link. And basically this link will be the link so that we can connect into the MongoDB. I'll be using my temp user here and my password instead of password. So I suggest you to be doing the same. Now I can delete that and I'll be saving this file, right? So now that we have the both session and the MongoDB connection here, we're going to implement a code that will read this file, right? So basically that is the reason why I've installed that another instantiation package. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a check here. So basically we're going to say if process.env node env, this is capital, is different than production, we want to read the file, we want to import the .env config. So be .env.config. So basically what that does, just to explain a little bit for you, it does the following. if we are starting our server, as a development environment, that what we're doing now, it's going to import this extension, and this extension will look inside this file. So basically it will import these both variables as a global variables. So then we can do a connection for the database using this information. So do you remember that we installed also the MongoDB, right? So let's do Mongoose. We're going to import Mongoose, and we're going to use it to do the connection with the database, basically. So be Mongoose. This makes much easier for us to use MongoDB. If you never used that before, it will be quite fun. It's quite easy to use. Hopefully you're going to be able to get what I'm saying by that. So then after we have the hello and the use here, let's create a try and catch. And then basically what are we going to do? We're going to use Mongoose, so that we're going to try to connect our database. So we use mongoose.connect. This is a method that will require us some options and some other configurations that we're going to do. So then the first argument that we need to pass will be the process.env. To remember that we are requiring env here. So now we have access to exactly to this variable that we defined here. So MongoDB connection, and as a second argument, you're going to pass an object that will take a field configuration. So here we're going to say use new URL parser. This is something to do with the version of the Mongoose that we're doing. So because we're using the version, the newer version that is after the 3 release, so we need to pass both things. Will be this one and this unified topology. So I don't want to get super deep in these details, but basically what this does, this is a configuration that requires us, allows us to connect to MongoDB database using this string, right? So make sure that you got this right from the website, otherwise it won't work. And then what we can do here, we can do a console.log and add here MongoDB connected. So this is mean if we do read that, it means that it did work. If it didn't work, we're going to throw an error here, right? Then we can do console.log error for now. So see, this is not working. Let me check why. Okay, so it's not working because .env is not working. Let's make sure that we install .env. Yeah, we did. Let me think. Oh, I see. I have a typo here. So this needs to be a method call. See? So straight away connected to MongoDB. 2 things for you to keep in mind. If you're failing to connect and your code is correct, normally could be something to do with either your credentials. So make sure that you come back and database access, make sure that you have a client that you're using, make sure that the password is correct. Otherwise you can create a new password. If you forget, you can do edit password, you can change that. Or the most of the times when it doesn't work is also because the network access is not defined with either your IP address or with 000, that will be like a white list that will allow anyone to connect. Keep in mind that sometimes when you turn off your computer, you can have a new IP address, so that will directly change this. So maybe if I restart my computer, restart my connection with the internet, maybe I'll need to change that. So I'm telling you that just basically so that you keep that in mind, because if you're following my tutorial exactly the way I'm doing, maybe you have an issue, so that's good for you to keep it in mind, right? So come back to the code. So now we have the connection with the MongoDB working. We have all the configuration that we needed. So now it's time for us to start to create our app, right? So the first thing that we're going to work together will be towards building the user module and the user controller. So the way I like to do that is I'm going to show you. So we're going to follow a pattern that is MVC. We're going to do a model view controller, and that's how basically we're going to keep with our app, so that we make sure that we're following good standards. So inside this folder, we're going to create another folder called models, like that. And inside models, I'll create a file that will be the user model, and it's capital U just because it's a model. So model in controllers, we're going to keep the initialization with capital. So we're going to, instead of using camel case, we're going to be using uppercase and all the letters, right? So inside the user, we're going basically import Mongoose again. And then with Mongoose, we're gonna be able to define our first model, right? So I'm gonna define here a user schema. This is going to be a new Mongoose schema. And basically this is take an object, right? So if you never worked with databases before, here we're defining how our data is shaped, how Mongoose can help us to save our data. So we're telling to the Mongoose that we're gonna have a new module. It's gonna be called user, and we'll have a few properties inside. In this case, we're going to have first name, and the first name will be a string. We will also have a last name. The last name also will be a string. We're going to have a password. The password also will be a string. And we're going to have an email that also will be a string. For now, I won't make them required. I'll make that simple just for this first example, but we're going to be changing this in the future, just to keep that in mind. So now, after doing that, we need to do a module.export, and this is going to be basically a mongoose.models. The first string will be the module name, so in this case will be user, and you're going to pass the user schema to that. So now we're exporting a user schema that has a model called user. Next thing that we're going to do, we're going to create a controller. So coming back to the server, we're going to have a router that will be basically a register router, right? Register. So when you have a register router, we're going to do something to receive some data here, and this data will be saved inside the MongoDB database. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. So just to show you what I mean, so hello from register. So this will create another GET request for us into the register path. So now if we come back to Insomnia, if we come back to Insomnia, you can create a request to register, and this returns hello from register. I'll be deleting that later on. This is just so that I can explain to you how these things works. This is kind of an example. Actually, what we want here will be a post request. If you never came across a request, do you remember that I showed you before here when you create a new request, just so that we are in the same page? You have a few types of requests. Get request is when you get some data from somewhere. Post request is basically when you send the data to the server. This is the pattern that we use. Put is when you are updating an object that doesn't exist yet. So for example, if I create a new user, you're going to do a post request. If this user doesn't exist, you're going to create using post. But if you're going to create, if you have a user already but you want to change the name or the email address, you would create a put request, right? And the delete the request is quite self-explanatory. So this is for delete perhaps a user, so we can do that as well. So the post request, it will take a different thing, and that's where it starts to get interesting, right? Because we're following a different pattern here. So we're going to come back here in our models. We're going to create a new folder, and will be the controllers, right? And then inside the controllers, let's create a user controller, register controller, register controller.js. So basically inside the register controller, we're going to import a few things. First, initially, we're going to need the user. So let's require that from our module. So this will be from the module. So we come back to the models. We want the user module here so that we can work with it. And then we're going to do model.export. This will be an object, so we're going to export the entire file. Our first method that we're going to have will be, let's create an async method that we'll call store. And this will take a request and a response, like the express route. And basically, we're going to try to do a few things here. The first thing, do you remember how we define our module, right? So somehow we want to create a user, and this user needs to have those properties, right? First name, last name, password, and email. So I want my function to take from the body of the message all this information. So how we can do that? We can do, I need first name, I need last name, I want the password, and I want an email, right? And if you're thinking, where did you take this from? So these are where I'm taking this from, right? So this will come from the request. So just to explain a little bit more about request, do you remember that we have a post request here? So let's import our first controller down here. So you're going to say register controller equal require. This will be coming from the controllers, register controllers. I'm going to pass to this function just to show you what I mean. We're going to pass the second argument, the entire controller, right? So basically what this controller does, it has a method inside that we call store. That is basically the file that we're defining here. So inside this object, we have the method store, and this we'll take a request, and from the request.body, we're going to grab all these properties, right? So right now, what I want to do to show you is basically console this log. So let's make sure this is saved, it's connected. So now if I come back to the store, I create this folder here. You can create clicking with the right mouse, click, so new folder. So I call this store, and I have a create user method here, right? And this is a post, as you can see. So why I'm doing that? I'm doing that because I want to send to my server this information. This is exactly what I want to send. So here you have a few options, like, let me create this request with you just to show you how you would do that. New create user request. So then you're going to say this is a post request and I want to send a JSON object. That's how it will do, right? And then from this one I have created already just to show you. Let me delete this one. So you would create inside the JSON, and here JSON, you would create a JSON object, right? This is just an object, a JavaScript object, and we need an email, password, first name, last name, right? And then do you remember the URL 80,000? We're going to send that to register as a post request. So if I send this now, what's going to happen? See? I'm showing you. So inside rec.body, I have all the informations that I need. And basically what I'm doing here, this is the structuring, right? So instead I'm doing, I'll do like rec.body.firstname, and I can destructure this property using ES6. So if you never came across this before, we are destructuring here. We're basically saying inside hack.body, I want email, password, last name, and first name. That is basically this info that we see here, because I was consoling a log before. So now that I know that this works, what are we going to do with that, right? With all this information? We're going to do a few things. The first thing that we're going to do is create a new user. So let's do a const user. This user basically will be, we're going to use a user, we're going to use a user module that we imported from Mongoose, and this will give us the power to save into the database. So we're going to say user is equal a user dot create, and then inside the create we're going to pass an object. And just to explain to you how that works, we need to fulfill our contract with the module. So in this case, I'm telling you that the user should have this information, and in the controller we need to make sure that the user has all that information, right? So there's a few ways that we can do. So an object you can assign in the following way. You can say first name equals, this is an object, remember that, first name, last name, last name, I'm missing comma here, password, password, email, email, right? This is our user. Basically, what this does, this is fulfill the user information that we need. So we're telling the Mongoose we want to have something saved inside the database that will be called user, and the user will have these properties. And here we are creating user and passing to the user, that is the module, with the method create. And if you look here, you will say is a shortcut for save one or more documents to the database. So this will save into the database, and we're going to return basically a response.json, because we want to return a JSON, and let's return the user. The thing is, we're creating an async function because we're going to talk to the server. So we need to await in this operation, right? So this is basically, we'll create a user, So let's create a user. Inside the user, I want to create with all this information and return the response. And if you have an error, let's throw an error if we have an error, right? So in this case, I want to throw an error. And what we can pass is basically a message saying error while registering new user, and let's pass here the error, right? So if something goes wrong, we're gonna be able to see what was wrong. So yeah, let's try this. There's a few things I want to show you, but for now I have this request that we created together. So I want to create a test user. I think I have in my database a test user already, so I'm gonna change to test1.com. And my first name, my last name, my password is password. So let's create that. Oh, I have a typo here, sorry. So basically the response failed because I had a typo there, but now I send the request again. We got 200 back, so the request has succeeded. So the MongoDB is super nice database, and I will explain a few things now. So I have now a new user with all the properties that I need, and what MongoDB does for us, it creates for us an ID, and we will attach to this user. So every single object that you create inside MongoDB will create an ID and a version, right? So the version means this is version 0 of this user. If you update this user, change its email, this version could be changed if you are using the versioning from MongoDB. In this case, we are not using. This is a feature that you need to pay to use. So it's kind of GitHub. You can keep a track of all the data that you have, and then if something goes wrong, you could recover that data using versioning. So forget about the versioning right now. So basically, there's a few things that we need to address, right? If you look, you don't want never to store the password of the client, because you don't want people to be able to see what the password is. You don't want the server to hold what the password is either. So now we need to address the password, and we need to hash this password, right? And there's a library that I like to use that is called bcrypt, the name. So we're going to install this library right now. So I'm going to stop the server. I will be doing npm install bcrypt. This library is super easy to use. It's super easy. You guys are going to see what I mean by that. So now when I'm creating a new user, we also need to remember what happens if you send perhaps this email, right, to create a new user, but this is an email that already exists. So we need to cover this, right? And the way that we're going to do that, before we create a new user, we're going to check to see if the user exists. And then the following thing that we're going to do is hash the password. So we're going to make this password be safe. So even us, that we own the server, we would never know the password that the customer has chosen, right? And that's the safest way that you can do. So basically what we need to do now is the following. We need to define existent user. So this is going to be another await, because this is an async method again. So we want to talk to user and find by. Find one is the method that we need. So basically we're saying, if you read the method definition, finds on document, the condition are cast to the respective schema table before the command is sent. So we want to tell Mongoose, go in the database and check if you have this email already saved there. If you have, don't do anything. So what we need to do is if the user, existing user, now I'm gonna say doesn't exist, this is becomes negative, right? So like if he exists, I don't want to do anything. So if he doesn't exist, we want to create a new user. So basically we're protecting ourselves here so that we don't duplicate data, right? So now I'm going to move that. If you hold Alt in the Mac, Alt on Windows as well, and put arrow up, you can arrow up and arrow down. So this is quite helpful. So then we want now to save this user, right? So basically, if you find this, we don't do anything because this is not what we want to do. This return JSON, needs to be inside as well, because we want to return a user if we have a user. If we don't have a user, we need to return, if we have an existing user, we're going to return a message saying, oops, we have already a user with that email, right? So we can return here, return rest.status. Let's do status, and this will be the code of the status, and this is like a bad request. So we're gonna do a JSON response after that, and basically we'll have a message, and inside this message we can just type something like email user, right? Email user already exists. This message will be used for the front end, right? So basically what we want to say is like, do you want to log in instead? Because then we can use that in the front end, if you know what I mean. So now I create a user with this email, right? What happens if I send another request? Oh, hold on. I need to run dev again. Server needs to be on. So now that we have a user and we are telling you that the user already exists, if I send another request, it sends a bad request back saying a message, email user already exists, do you want to log in instead? So this is very helpful. This is help us to keep the flow of our code. However, it doesn't solve the problem of the password yet. And remember, we just installed the bcrypt. So now we're going to do const bcrypt bcrypt equal require bcrypt. This is quite fun, guys. So look what we're gonna do now. We're gonna say inside this block we're gonna define const hash password. I think the right thing will be hashed password. This is going to be equals await. Remember this is another asynchronous function, so be await and then bcrypt dot hash, and we will pass the password here, and the second argument is how strong you want the password to be encrypted. So if this number is higher, it gets larger and larger passwords, but also is lower for the server. So imagine that you have a service that, you know, takes hundreds of requests per second. So you need to find a place where it's high but enough, and I would say that 10 is a good number. So we're gonna use 10 here, right? And then basically what we can do for the password, now we want to pass a hashed password, right? Why we want to do that? Because the request came to us as a password. We don't save this password anywhere, but when we send to the Mongoose, we send the hashed password, right? So now if we create a new user, let's see if that works, right? So now I'm gonna say this is gonna be the test2 because it's checked by email. So let's try to see the password. It's going to be password, right? If we send this request, it creates a new user with a different ID because the email was different. And look the password, guys. So now this is a hashed password, right? If you go inside the MongoDB database, so you can go in clusters. This is quite nice. You can go to collections. You will see a few collections here because I was using the same database for development. In this case, we have a test environment and we have a user, right? So now if you look here, we have 3 users so far. The first one didn't have the password hash, second one didn't have password hash, and the third one, there we go, guys. So in this case, we wouldn't know the password of the client, right? And that's what we want to do to be safer. Now that we solved that, another thing that I find quite useful is that this is the normal way that you create objects, but there is a shorthand that I would like to show you guys. So because email and email is the same name, so we're receiving a property that has exactly the same name as the field that we're saving. You can do the shorthand and just say email instead. The same for last name and first name. So if you take that out and you take that out, this will work just as it did before. I'm just gonna reorganize here because I think it gets a little bit more readable, because the only custom value that we pass is password. So this is ES6 the structuring as well. So basically you're passing a property that has the name and value with the same thing. So this is the value, this is the name of the property. So in this case, just to show that that works, let's create a third email. So now we're going to have a third email, and let's change the password for test, right? There we go. So it works fine. There you have, guys. So now we have our first controller saving the user. We have a user module. We have a server running, and we have all the setup in place so that we can continue with our series. So I hope that you guys have fun, and I will start working again in the next episode so that I can release during this next week. So guys, thank you very much. Make sure that if you're following this series that you are leaving a comment to support the channel again, and leaving a like, because the like helps us to show this video for more people, and that's basically allows me to do the work I'm doing, helping more people to learn how to code. So thanks very much. I see you guys in the next video.